like to welcome you to another episode of the Weapon H All in One podcast. I'm your host, Herman Austin, aka Weapon H. And today I have a special guest with us today. I met this lady so many years ago. I'm not going to say that because I'm not going to tell on each other. So we're not telling on ourselves today. But we met each other a long time ago in the country of Portugal. And she made the journey all the way over here to the States. She's an American citizen now. I mean, the whole thing. And we're going to get into her story because her story just really captivating how she came over here and just made things happen. So I'd like to introduce Mariza Rodriguez.
Hi.
Did I say that right?
No.
Well, then tell us what it is then. Come on.
When you met me, my last name was Rodriguez. Yes.
Oh.
No longer. So
I have my phone all this time. Okay.
I know you have to update it.
See.
Pereira now.
Pereira. Okay. All right. Oh, the last name of my agent when I was in Portugal. How about that?
Well, then you won't be able to forget it.
Absolutely. See.
So yeah, it is I. It has been a lifetime ago since we met.
Yes, very long time ago. But to get started, I want you to tell me what brought you to the States?
I think it was a mix of nativity and love.
Okay.
So if you remember many years ago when we met, I met someone, okay, so my ex-husband, I met him back then. I came here, I followed him here.
Gotcha.
We met in Portugal. He was with the NATO military and representing the U.S. Navy, and he brought me here.
Oh, no,
4 years after dating.
Okay. All right. Not bad. But one thing that was super interesting about your whole story, I remember you telling me this a long time ago. This is like when you first got here. You was like, Herm, one day I want to be a lawyer. Now, she had this plan a long time ago. She didn't have the green card or anything at this time, but she knew this is what she wanted to do. And she got all of her paperwork and she did she went through a lot of ups and downs. So I'm sure she'll be able to tell you a little better than me. But tell me some of the things that you had to fight through in order to become a lawyer with people not believing in you and the whole thing.
Okay, so I suppose it won't make sense to start at the beginning. We can start at the beginning of the actual journey into school. I will say, briefly reference that my ex-husband was the first one to try to stop me. So it started there. But it didn't stop me. He didn't like that I enrolled in school, but I did it anyway. And because I was going to school, he used to lock me outside of our own home.
Wow.
He wasn't very happy that I was going to school, but I persevered. Eventually, their marriage did come to an end. It ended in an abusive, it was an abusive marriage. It ended in an abrupt way. And so many years later, I was able to re-enroll in school. In the meantime, I had battled the challenges of being undocumented. I didn't learn that I was undocumented until after I had run away from my husband. It got to the point where he split open my hand. And after that, it got really scary to make my way back home. I used to get creative getting home. I used to jump over the window, jump over the balcony, pick a lock. But every time I got a creative way of getting in the house, he would figure out that's how I got in and put an additional barrier to that.
Wow.
So it would be a few years after I ran away before I was able to enroll in school, because it was only then that I realized that I was undocumented. Now, he had paid an immigration attorney to pretend he was filing for my papers.
Wow. Wow. And just to let you guys know, this is actually what she is now, an immigration lawyer.
That's right.
So, so on your way to being an immigration lawyer, I know you worked at the World Bank for a little while. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So I actually graduated. I eventually moved to Paris. You might remember I was getting homesick.
True.
And as you know, the plan was always to be an attorney, but not just any attorney. I wanted to be an attorney in the US. And so what happened is that I really wasn't sure that I was going to be able to even make it to law school, but I wanted to try.
Right.
And the funds were limited. I'm a single mom. So the funds were limited. I could only apply to so many schools, but I did get in. I ended up attending school at the American University for undergrad, and then eventually made my way to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. At both schools, I encountered women, not men, women professors who told me I should rethink my plans.
Wow.
And a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was a single mom, and they thought that my priorities weren't straight. But I did it. I got a full ride to law school against all odds, and I did get creative with the access to scholarships, and then engaged in many activities. One of which was the Immigration Law Clinic, and this is where my passion for immigration law was further nurtured.
Wow. That's tough. Man, that is one heck of a journey. I mean, you put through a lot to ride to where you are today. So you see, I mean, obviously right now, with all of this stuff going on with immigration and all that, are you becoming more like, a lot more busy now that you have so many issues with immigration coming up with all these, they sending people out with ICE doing all these things that they're doing?
I think people are panicking. I get a lot of phone calls, people just not knowing what and if they should do anything. There are people here who have gone under the radar, who managed to enter the country undetected, and they have different concerns from the ones who actually are going through immigration proceedings right now.
Right.
And then there are those who are just law-abiding citizens who are panicking because they have a parking ticket and they worry that something might happen to them. There's a client. There's a client who was mistakenly arrested. It was a mistaken identity case. He was arrested. A black man who was arrested when they were looking for a white man with a similar name. With a similar name, not quite the same,
right,
and different languages, but similar in pronunciation. But if you see it on paper, it's completely different.
right.
But he was attributed the name of this individual who was wanted and was arrested. Ultimately, he was released. Ultimately, he was able to get those charges against him dismissed. However, immigration is not content with that because his fingerprints are associated with the actual criminal, the name of the actual criminal, the perpetrator, and the charges are very, very serious. On January 6, 2025, Trump actually enacted the Lincoln-Riley Act, whereby people with so much as a charge, not just having been found guilty, not actually having been adjudicated in the matter, but with so much as a charge in certain crimes, are deemed deportable. And so here's a person who didn't do anything, isn't even of the right race, who is now facing some serious immigration consequences.
Wow, that is crazy, crazy, crazy. And you, I mean, everyone knows me and you met in Portugal, but your background is not just Portuguese. So give me a little bit on your background. I know already, but give me a little background for the people here.
Yeah, I love talking about my background.
Good.
So I am, as you know, I'm Afro-Portuguese. I am Angolan and Portuguese. I'm not Angolan by some DNA test, as some people tend to think. I am bicultural also. So biracial and bicultural. My family, I am a product of both colonization and a civil war. My father immigrated to Portugal, my father and his family, in the 70s after Portugal's fascist government fell and Angola regained its independence as the country of Angola. And a civil war broke out that lasted about 30 years.
Wow. Wow. That's a great history lesson. And for those that, I mean, yes, she's the product of the, let's see, me, I found out mine through the DNA test. So, and the DNA test was the one that she told me about. So, and ended up finding out I'm 91% African with a big chunk of it is Nigerian.
Nice.
Yes,
Now you have to go to Nigeria.
you already know it. You already know. Go there. I might even get a passport. So let's see how that works out.
You know, interestingly enough, that same DNA test said that I was Kenyan. But I know I'm not Kenyan.
Yeah, but I mean, you may have a little bit in there. So, but
So I,
yeah, you
I
know.
guess at some point our ancestors did travel.
And it was so crazy about the report. It actually did all of that. It showed like the paths that take them when it's
Migration.
possible. I was like, wow, that was pretty,
Fascinating, isn't it?
yeah, that was pretty good. I was like, oh my goodness. Now, Easton and Yoruba, yes, you already know the part the tribes too. See. But it's definitely a great thing of knowing where your lineage possibly came from. So that was one of the reasons why I took the test. And then once you told me that was a good one, I just rolled with it, and here we are.
Yeah, thank you for the vote of trust. I didn't know you had gone through with it,
Oh yeah.
but I'm glad now you know. I know I know how much it means to me to be able to point out to where I'm from, where my family's from. Actually, we're from a place in Angola called Cabinda,
Okay.
which is still striving to become independent from Angola. And if you look on the map, Cabinda is actually placed in the Congo. It's an enclave, and it's surrounded by the Congo, by both Congos.
Congo is there's a lot going on in Congo right now, boy. Well, it's
That's
been like that for a long time. It's just
we're just
it's
now
just starting to filter
realizing.
a little bit over here, only because of like social media. Because otherwise, you left it to the news, you wouldn't hear a thing.
Yeah, the news report, what
They don't mention it at all. So I always thought, well, I mean, I always knew that that kind of stuff has always been controlled. Like they want to control that narrative. You know how they, like if you're here in the States and you see Africa, you always think, no matter what country it is, because one, they think Africa is a country, but that's, you already know, it's a continent to start with a lot of countries. They have more countries than we have probably states. So, but they always like to portray it as this people living in huts and there's no, but they totally miss out on that. Some of the most advanced cities in the world are nestled in this continent. So
yeah.
it just always made me laugh at how they try to portray things here, because if they portray it as a place that you don't want to go, then they can go there and try to take all of the resources from this place because it's one of the most resource rich places in all the world. So,
That's a valid point you make. The capital city of Angola, Luanda, is one of the richest cities in the world. I mean, it's just as expensive to go to Luanda as it is to go to Tokyo.
Right.
But people now they want to go to Tokyo. I met with I was in court one day and a bailiff had been to Angola. He was a former military. So when I told him I was half Angolan, he said, "Oh, I would never go back to Angola." And I said, "Why is that?" You know, he said, "Oh, I didn't really like it when I was there." When I asked him when he was there, I said, "Well, no wonder." You know, you were there when there was war. Why would
Right.
you
Yeah.
go back now that there's peace? You know, so the narrative, you know, even for those who have stepped foot in Africa at some point, even those people sometimes tend to have a skewed view of
Preconceived notion. Yep.
what
Absolutely.
African countries and cities are like.
Yeah. And me, I love it. So yeah, I would even buy a place there one day, one of the countries. So we're gonna see about it.
Maybe Nigeria.
Okay, absolutely. Why not? I mean, that's the start.
It's a good place.
No problem at all. But I'm definitely gonna be going there very soon, and I'll let you know though once I get all that done. So we got into your journey here. We got into your lifelong dream of being a lawyer, how you made that happen. Also, you're very avid in fitness. And ladies and gentlemen, this lady here did a whole triathlon. Now, I'm a professional athlete. I was a professional basketball player for 18 years. I was always in peak shape. I'm not doing a triathlon. Because I can, the bike riding, okay, I'm with that. That run, that's probably, and then the swimming, it's just the swimming, I'll be somewhere. And if I don't have on a life vest, you ain't got to worry about me doing the swimming part. Because I can swim, but not like that. So tell me, what was the thing that got you to first want to do it, and then tell me about how the rigorous and the training that you put yourself through to be able to complete it.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. Look, I will say this. Um, it probably comes as no surprise to you that everyone who trains is chasing some kind of ghosts. All of these athletes that you can think of that do ultra marathons, a lot of us were really chasing ghosts away. I'm not going to say all of us, but
Quite a bit.
the ones I've met, quite a great number of us. So I will say this, running was my first love. So I started running because I felt that where I grew up, the village where I grew up, where, you know, I had a divided family. I had a family, the Portuguese side of the family, who always made some um, innocent racist remarks about my background, right? And then my mom and my father started the journey down to divorce while she was still pregnant with me, and I think I took all of my mother's pain growing up surrounding their history. And then when my family first got to Portugal, in the northern part, as you know, I am technically from the north. Although I don't claim it because I grew
Yeah,
up
because you're always in the South.
in so, but where I grew up, where I spent a lot of my childhood, you know, there were no black people, you know, and so
It's the
we
North
looked,
for you, yeah.
yeah, so we looked different. Something was different. My brother looks Asian. Now my kid looks Asian. So we just had this ambiguous look to us, but everybody knew. Okay, everybody knew where this was coming from, and so because it was such a small village, so I found refuge in running because I felt like I was surrounded by ignorant people, and I mean this with all the love in my heart. I am, you know, the highest educated person in my family. And as a child, I just felt that I was misunderstood, that no one really understood where I was coming from. And so I found this passion for running just almost by accident. And one day, Benfica, um, Benfica, one of the girls that ran for Benfica in the track and field team, and you can tell the folks about Benfica, but
Yes,
she
I
recruited
was.
me. She said, "You should meet my father," you know? And I said, "I don't have money." And she said, "Oh, I'm sure that won't be a problem." And it wasn't. And I did that for so long. I don't think my family even knows about that. But I felt seen, you know, I felt welcomed. And there was a place where I would just show up. I didn't have to talk, you know, no one had to make fun of my accent. There were no funny remarks about anything. You just show up, you run, you do what you do best. Fast forward a few years later, when I was here, fleeing domestic violence, fleeing, you know, a whole rack of criminal acts that I was a victim of. I continue to find that solace in running, right? And so through law school, running got me through law school, right? And so when I joined the World Bank, while I was still in law school, and forgive me, I know you asked me this question earlier. I just sent my resume one day to somebody. They were impressed, and then next thing you know, I was at the World Bank. And so I realized when I was at the World Bank, at this point, I was living in Virginia, and I was very stressed. The student loans were racking up. I get zero child support. I'm raising two boys alone. And I was very, very stressed. And I realized that traffic made me really angry. So, and I didn't know this about me because I grew up poor, as you know. I also didn't have credit history in this country. And at one point, while I was commuting, making the long commute from Virginia to DC, because I was it was a 2-hour commute in this county called Loudoun County, I met a bus driver. The bus driver actually ended up co-signing for my very first car because when he asked me why was I walking, because he knew where the stop was, and where do you walk to? You know, where do you park? And I said, I don't park. I don't have a car. And he said, but you need a car. And I was like, well, you know, I can't get a car. I don't have a job. I don't have anyone who would co-sign. I don't have. He's like, but you have kids. This Peruvian man, a beautiful soul,
Wow.
ended up co-signing for me. It just so happened, destiny would have it so that at that same time, the University of Pittsburgh School of Law had elected me to be the recipient of the Outstanding Achievement Award, which came with monetary award. And so I received the check out of nowhere. I didn't even know this was a thing. Apparently, my professors put my name in, the dean, and so they decided that this one award that is awarded to those who graduate law school in the face of adversity, I had been selected to be the recipient. So with that money, I was able to and with Walter, that's his name, the bus driver who helped me out, who I was able to get that car. And so now that I'm driving to and from, I realize that traffic stresses me out.
Right.
You know how they say you can't miss what you never had. I didn't know. I didn't look forward to driving a car. I hoped one day I would, but I had no real ambition to that. And so what happened when I realized that the commute was too far and it was too expensive, I ended up moving closer to the World Bank, to a county a little closer, but that anger was bottled up in me. I had so much anger, Carmen.
It was a lot, but that comes from a lot of trauma that you really didn't totally deal with. You coped by doing the running, but you never totally dealt with that trauma. So
you said it. And I think because I was trying to situate myself, getting myself out of poverty, raising these boys, getting my papers, going through school. And now I'm graduated. I have this amazing job at the World Bank and I'm angry. Now everything's coming out and traffic stresses me out. So I bought a bike. I bought a bike.
All right. No. Well, it was and it wasn't. I mean, because it did have some benefit because you didn't have to worry about traffic as much, but that was a hell of a ride.
Other concerns, that's true. But if you stick to the trailers, You know, it's a longer route, but it can be safer,
Right.
right? But yes, it does come with a lot of other stresses. But what I realized is that I was showing up, smiling. People noticed that too, you know, and the World Bank being a great place to work at, we have lockers. I had access to locker rooms, park the bike, take a shower. It was like having a ritual in the morning. I finally had me time outside of the boys, outside of paying student loans, outside of paying bills. I said, you know what, this is amazing. I love this. So I'm already biking, I'm already running. So then I said, you know what? I miss swimming because, as you know, growing up in Cascais, not in the north, in Cascais, where you live, then, you know, that I needed that. You know, therapy should have been my first choice, but it wasn't my first thought. We
Right.
didn't think of
But
therapy.
we didn't at that time. Yeah, we did. We just
We
didn't.
weren't raised to think
No.
of therapy
We would
first.
start to think of how to deal with it. We find ways to cope, deal with it, and try to move on and block it out as much as we can. But we just, yeah, I mean, nowadays it's different, but we didn't know.
We really didn't. We
Yeah.
really didn't. And I think, you know, I think that automatic survival mode and wanting to just, you know, do as much as you can, right? So I started swimming. And when I realized I was doing all three modalities, I just had a moment because I missed competing. I missed that being seen that I told you about when I was running for Bifica. I missed that because I was just, you know, you know, it's if somebody who's Latino sees me, they speak Spanish to me, you know, if which is fine because I speak Spanish, but it's not my native language, right?
Right.
If I see anybody, you know, anybody just assumes an identity about me, and I thought, well, you know, I missed that being seen aspect. So I went ahead and signed up for my first triathlon back in 2019, which, as you know, ended up not happening
Right.
because I had my brain injury. So this is how that started, right? So my very long answer to you, this is how I came about that. I miss being seen, I miss the competitiveness of it all, and the structure that it comes with training allows me time. I make time because as moms, you know, whether you're a single mom or not, as moms, and I dare even say as parents, we often feel guilty for making time for ourselves.
Right.
So we tend to sacrifice on things we really shouldn't. You know, we think that perhaps sitting on the couch, being in the presence of your kid, being on the couch, you know, they at least know that you're there, but you're stressed, you may be anxious, and, you know, you're not really fully there anyway,
Right.
right? And I remember I had a professor at American University who dared tell me that. She said, you know, you're going to fail my class.
Oh.
You should be a mom. I was a mom. She said, I was a mom when I was getting my PhD, but I had a caring, loving husband. She threw that in my face. I had a very supporting, loving, caring husband, and I was able to study. And I'll never forget, she had a nook underneath the staircase, and she said this. She said, the kids could at least see her.
See,
So this idea,
I have a huge problem with her,
see
man,
you,
because you're supposed to be trying to uplift her, help her figure out a way where she can do these things, where you can do the mother and still be in school. Instead, she's trying to push you aside, and I have an idea why, but you know, that just always just irks me because to me, it's always about trying to uplift and push, help people, push them along. The
you
negativity, man, you never know what someone can become because some negative comments can change someone who could have been great in a field that now we'll never see because they were shot down and they may not have had the mental capacity to be able to push through the negativity like you did.
Yeah, so, and you know, I will tell you that the biggest cultural shock to me coming to America was finding out that women do not like other women. And I had background, you know,
Yeah.
in my Afro Portuguese community, we're all women. I
Right.
have such a large group of girlfriends, you know, but American girlfriends, I have three.
Oh, wow.
Maybe, and then I have more male American friends than I have female American friends. And I'm a girly girl. I prefer to be friends with girls, as you know. But it's this thing, this I don't know what it is about the American culture where you just don't get a lot of that. And I don't know where the mistrust comes from, and I don't dare speaking on it. But I
Right.
will tell you that from my personal experience, it has been harder to be friends with girls, women, than it has been in this country, than it has been to be friends with the male counterparts.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and it's what's crazy. That doesn't even surprise me much. So, I mean, when you, soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, because
And
a lot of
interestingly
women
enough,
are like that. So, I mean, it doesn't even matter. Just a lot of them are more male. They get along better. They can tell the male things more because then the women end up becoming catty or whatever the case may be. They just don't seem to get along as well as they should.
yeah, and interestingly enough, in undergrad, in college, in law school, my male teachers and professors were my biggest cheerleaders, you
Wow.
know, biggest cheerleaders at American University. My I had a law class, for undergrad. He wrote a letter of recommendation. He even approached me one day and said, "Hey, if you were ever considering law school, I would love to help you." And I said, "How did you know? How did you know?" That's the only thing I've ever even considered. So, and I apologize. I'm sure you hear my child in the background. It's
When I do the editing, I'll see if I can, I'll get the background out. But
okay.
tell Sandra,
So, but if you can't,
put him
apologies
in
for the background noise.
Sandra on the chokehold. Yeah, you know I don't play that.
We gotta make them do more push-ups.
Yeah, exactly.
So to go back to the support, I think I found more support really here in the male counterparts, and now now I'm not shocked about it anymore, and I have solidified my friendships, and I'm good with a group of friends that I have made along the way.
Good.
I have amazing girlfriends from law school. That's where, shout out to my pit law friends.
Not out. We give it to you.
And it's been great. It's been a great journey. But I will tell you that without sports, and I will tell you that without my group of friends, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. Wow.
I wouldn't have made it this far. I can say that with 100% certainty. I had friends who helped put some money together to help pay for my law school applications.
Wow.
I had friends who were helping proofreading. I mean, it's not like I had somebody in my family I could send to, right? And speaking of American friends, it was my American friends were the ones who had this experience of applying for colleges. They were the ones who could give me the feedback. And
Right.
so without the friends, the amazing friends that I have, I wouldn't have gotten through this. I wouldn't have gotten through my brain injury, and I certainly wouldn't be where I am today.
Wow. Very cool. And great story. And before we get out of here, I did one more thing I want to touch on. How many languages do you actually speak since we brought that up a little earlier?
Did we bring it up? I don't know.
Yeah, remember you said they taught Spanish and then they'll speak something else, and even a little Portuguese. So yeah.
So fluently, you can say I speak fluently 4 languages. I know 6 languages.
Okay.
And
Off.
so, sure. So the languages that I work, my working languages are English, as you know. So I have to count that.
Of course.
English, Portuguese, French, and Spanish. I actually work in those languages. I read, write, and speak in all of those languages. I understand Portuguese Creole fluently. I don't know how many people who are watching your podcast that know that Creole isn't just French Creole. There are many forms of Creole.
I'm new to that one because I thought it was just French Creole, because being that I speak French, I like to hear the differences in the Creole and when you speak in regular French. I'm like, oh my God, that's the same word. Oh yeah, okay. So
Amazing, isn't it?
yes, very
So, and you know, in Curaçao, they speak a Creole that's mixed with Dutch and Portuguese.
wow.
So, and in Cabo Verde, they speak a Portuguese Creole, and
Right.
Bissau has their own version of Creole. So,
Then
Creole,
you have Brazil, who's a different version of Portuguese, and I mean,
well,
it's right.
Brazilian Portuguese, that's Portuguese, but Brazilian Portuguese, but you know, that's different.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I always compare it to, you know, you have English,
In
British
British
English,
English, yeah.
you got American English, you got the
So many
Welsh, you know, you got so many versions of English, right? So naturally you're gonna find that with Portuguese as well, you know, that is spoken around the world. You know, everybody's got their own version,
absolutely.
which makes it even more fascinating. Your Brazilian fans may say that Brazilian Portuguese is number one, and I will tell you, it's a beautiful language. I prefer the Angolan version.
Of course,
Partial.
of course.
I'm partial to that because it is mixed with Kimbundu, some of the, you know, some of the original languages to Angola. So naturally, I'm partial to that. I think
Wow.
Brazilian Portuguese does borrow a lot of words from one of the Nigerian languages. For I believe maybe Yoruba. Don't quote me on that, but they do have a little bit of that kind of influence as well.
Gotcha.
And naturally, they also have the Angolan Portuguese influence because you know of the slave trade,
Right.
Portugal's most shameful
Yeah.
history.
It looks like a lot of countries try to block that out of everybody because they're all doing it. There's a whole lot of them that were doing it, but you know, like,
Yeah.
cool. Oh my God, I am so thankful that we finally were able to do this.
Thank you for having me.
It was my
This was
pleasure.
fascinating. I do want to say, before you let me go, um,
Y'all
just
go on. Yeah.
just a few final words. We don't know whose story, you know, we're really looking at when we see these postings on Instagram, on Facebook, or even the news. One thing that I see, I do want to touch on this immigration component. You will see the picture of a man, and they will say, "This is leader of an MS-13 gang." And then you look at the person, they got zero tattoos. If you know anything about the MS-13, it's a little suspicious, especially if you're going to be a leader.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
so use your discerning eye. You know, not all of us are here legally on our own volition. You heard my story. I didn't even know I was illegal until I ran away from an abusive marriage.
Right.
So some of us really, you don't know what the story is. And
Absolutely.
I would encourage everybody to do their own research. And don't forget that war does make people migrate to different places, but so is global warming. There are people who are coming here because their crops aren't growing anymore, and they're the sons and daughters of what's the English word of
What?
agriculture.
Oh, okay. The farmers? Well, we just
Farmers, thank you. They're the sons and daughters of farmers, and they're here because otherwise they wouldn't eat. Naturally, immigration laws don't care for
Hmm.
that.
At all.
Okay, there
Right.
is no immigration relief, you know, for global warming. There should be, but there isn't one. You know, have to spin it somehow, and the most savvy immigration attorneys certainly manage to file something meaningful, not frivolous, you know, to try to help people out. But I will tell you that with all of the stuff that's out here on the internet right now concerning all of these ICE cases and deportations, I can tell you firsthand, people who are not criminals are facing deportation, like in the example that I just gave you
Right.
today.
Yes.
People who have green cards, uh, have been detained at airports, and there are people who are getting kicked out even though they are fully documented. So I encourage everybody to make their own research.
I am
It's not as clear cut.
I'm super happy you brought that up because I wanted to get into that, but I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to. But that is incredibly important because a narrative that they place is rarely ever what is actually going on. They discarded the humanity out of each situation. And each situation is an individual case. And sure, you may have some people who are doing bad things when they come in, but there's so many more that aren't. So should be on a case by case basis, and you can't treat people like criminals if they haven't been proven to be a criminal. And it's just the whole system is just crazy because I mean now they're doing it, but my people have been through it. So everybody who's past or their ancestors may have gone through it should be more of a, how should I want to say, have more compassion for the situation. Compassion and research and find out what it really is, what's really going on, instead of just checking out a news bill. Because I don't even watch the news, to be quite honest. It's very rare I watch anything on this because it's rarely they tell you anything that's actual to a situation. They're going to put what they want to put out there. They want to push the narrative that they want to push. And you have a lot of people that watch that and will follow and come in hordes, and they come even to the point of violence because of something that they saw on the news that may or may not even be true.
You're right. So it's important to really use your discerning eye. And you know that expression, it be your own people sometimes. You touched on that. Some of the lowest approval rates for asylum applications in the US is through judges that are of immigrant background, either by first or second generation. And some of these votes in the most recent election was also by documented sons and daughters of immigrants, because there is this fantasy, this fantastical idea that somehow we should all be migrating here and there legally. Now, let's remember, when we say that something is criminal, what we're really saying is that something is against the law, okay? In the penal code, there isn't something that says if you enter here, you're going to be arrested and do X amount of years. There's no it's not criminal, okay, to enter a country undocumented. People do it all the time, all over the world.
Right.
Now, in ideal circumstances, people would apply for a visa. Sometimes these visas take years, and it could be the difference between life and death for some people, because they need access to medication, resources, and things like that. And if anybody, in my opinion, who's willing to cross the Rio Grande, there are people making their journey from Africa all the way to the American continent to then cross the Rio Grande on foot to make it here. So it's not just South Central Americans and Northern Americans that are coming here. It's also people who are journeying from places like Angola, and they're going all the way to where they can get a visa. So they get on that plane, they fly to some American country. By American, I mean the American continent.
Right.
They fly here, and then they make their journey on foot. It's a very dangerous journey. A lot of people don't make it. Women are raped, children are raped, men are assaulted, and it's dangerous. Everyone knows it's dangerous. And I one day made a post about this. No one really wants to leave home unless home is the wolf of the lion, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the mouth of the wolf, something like that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What happens is that when you sense like you're in danger, that home isn't safe, what do? And think about it as your own house. When you were a kid, and I urge anybody to think about every time mom and dad had an argument, did you feel safe? No. So what did you do? You went somewhere. Maybe you went in your room. Maybe you went in your neighbor's house. Maybe you didn't come home right away. You stayed after school. But everybody seeks a refuge in some way, shape, or form. And then we all grow up and we're so full of bias and we're so full of certainty that we're just sitting here trying to take away resources from the American people. And I'll tell you one more thing. undocumented people cannot get food stamps. So everybody needs to just, again,
read and actually read and learn and actually do some research.
yeah, because you can't get Social Security benefits without a Social Security number. No,
Yeah.
So with all of these things, when they come here, they live in very poor conditions a lot of times, in overcrowded spaces. A lot of times they're taken advantage of by their bosses. They're taken advantage of by their landlords, and they just got to live day by day, by day, by day, by day, by day. And you have to swallow the bitter pill and just stick to it, because what is being done to you is wrong, but you want your child to have a better chance at life.
Wow. Yep.
So you sit here and you stick through, and the INS code may say, look, you can't work undocumented. Now that specifically, yes, there are laws against that. But tell me which law says that you can't come in. That's why we have the law of asylum. And if you know anything about the history of the law of asylum, it goes back to when Hitler was persecuting the Jews. There were two boats that made their way to Canada, and they were turned around. They were told to turn around. They came here, and they were told to turn around. When they got back to Europe, they were all exterminated.
Wow.
So the law of asylum is here to give people the benefit of the doubt. This is why countries came together to say, you know what, this is an important law. And it just so happened that people said, okay, if you're undergoing certain conditions, you should be afforded protection under the laws of another country. No one thought that, and people still don't think that global warming is a big issue, but global warming wasn't contemplated, hasn't been, it should be,
I already know it, because all you got to do is put out a couple of programs and say it's not real, and people are going to run with it, instead of just actually, some stuff you can just look at the evidence and can tell. Like, you see all these places where the weather climate is extremely different from what it was back in the day. Those are the kind of thing that should raise your antennas up, but we just, no, that ain't about nothing. And that's why they're able to keep giving us, putting the information out, giving you this and making everybody believe and do all types of stuff that actually goes against your interests. So
yeah. And one final thing, in case you do have sons and daughters of immigrants who are watching this right now, I do want to say ICE cannot enter anyone's home without a warrant. Same thing with any other law enforcement. Do not open that door if there's no warrant.
Yep. There you go.
So demand that paperwork. If it's not signed by a judge, it's not a warrant.
There you
go.
You
don't have to open that door. And if they knock it down, which they're also doing, then they knock it down. But no reason why you should help them.
Right.
Unless you really have to under the law. So you demand that paperwork, tell your families and family members and friends. They require a warrant just like any other law enforcement agency.
Very good. I'd like to thank you for that, for the information. And thank you for just coming and just not only telling them what you do, expressing, because there's a lot that people don't really know what goes on as far as being an immigration lawyer and then the immigration laws, and they only go about the few things that they see on TV. So definitely appreciate you expressing that. Glad I was able to get that up out of you. So I like that. So again, thank everyone for joining in today. I want to thank Mariza one more time. And for another episode of the Weapon H All-in-One Podcast. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.